And that's why, when Congress created the Human Genome Project in 1990, the challenge was to get a complete list of our A's, T's, C's, and G's as quickly as possible. So the business of making tests, medicines, and cures could begin. They figured it would take about 15 years to decode a human being, and at the time, that seemed reasonable. Until this man, scientist, entrepreneur, and speedboat enthusiast Craig Venter decided that he could do it faster, much faster.
It's like sailing. Once you have two sailboats on the water going approximately in the same direction, they're racing. And science works very much the same way. If you have two labs remotely working on the same thing, one tries to get there faster or better, higher quality, something different, in part because our society recognizes only first place.
Back in 1990, Venter was one of many government scientists painstakingly decoding proteins and genes. His focus was one protein in the brain.
It took 10 years to get the protein, and it took a whole year to get 1,000 letters of genetic code.
For Venter, that was way too slow.
So you're sitting there thinking there must be a better way? Is that what when you're gazing out the window?
I mean, there had to be a better way.
And that's when he learned that someone had invented a new machine that could identify C's and T's and A's and G's with remarkable speed. And Craig Venter just loves machines that go fast.
I immediately contacted the company to see if I could get one of the first machines.
And here's how they work. Human DNA is chopped by robots into tiny pieces. These pieces are copied over and over again in bacteria and then tagged with colored dyes. A laser bounces light off each snip of DNA, and the colors that it sees represent individual letters in the genetic code. And these computers can do this 24 hours a day, every day.
So now you can see clearly the peaks. Yeah. So there's just a blue one coming up, so that's a C coming up. So you could read this and you could write this all down.
So blue, yellow, red, red, yellow.
So that's C, G, T, T, A.
Then somehow all these little pieces have to be put together again in the right order. Venter's dream was to have hundreds of new machines at his fingertips, so he quit his government job and formed a company he called Celera Genomics. Celera from the Latin word celerity, meaning speed. And this is what he built.
Oh my Lord. And you know what, it's interesting? There's like almost nobody here.
Yeah. It's all automated.
So who is this guy, and why is he such a bulldog for speed? Craig Venter grew up in California, left high school and spent a year as a surfing bum on the beach by day and a stock boy at Sears by night. He was inevitably drafted, went to Vietnam with the Navy. That's him way over there on the left. He was eventually assigned to a naval hospital in Da Nang during the Tet Offensive when Americans were taking very heavy casualties. At 21, he was in the triage unit where they decide who will live and who will die. In the spring of 1998, Venter announced that he and his company were going to sequence all 3 billion letters of the human genome in 2 years. Remember, the government said it was going to take 15.
There was a lot of arrogance that went with that program. They were going to do it at their pace, and a lot of the scientists, if they were really being honest with you, would tell you that they planned to retire doing this program. That's not what we think is the right way to do science, especially science that affects so many people's lives.
Craig's a high testosterone male he just loves being an iconoclast, right? He loves rattling people's cages, and he's done that consistently in the Genome Project.
Craig Venter's announcement that his team would finish the entire genome in just 2 years galvanized everybody working on the public project. Now, they were scrambling to keep up.
There are some limitations. We don't think we can get this thing to go any faster at the moment without throwing a lot more robotics at it. The arm physically takes 20 seconds to move.
Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project, was determined that Celera was not going to beat his teams to the prize. He made a dramatic decision to try to cut 5 full years off the original plan.
that be an okay way to do it?
When the major genome centers met and agreed to go for broke here, I don't think there was anybody in the room that was very confident we could do that. I mean, you could sit down with a piece of paper and make projections if everything went really well that might get you there, but there were so many ways this could have just run completely off the track.
At MIT, they decided to try to scale up their effort 15-fold. And that meant a major change in their usual academic pace.
We basically had a goal since March to get to a plate-a-minute operation from womb to tomb all the way through.
In the fall of 1999, representatives from the 5 major labs come to check out Eric Lander's operation. All the big honchos in the Human Genome Project are here. Scientists from Washington University in St. Louis, Baylor College of Medicine in Texas, the Department of Energy. She's from the Sanger Center in England. If they want to finish the genome before Craig Venter, these folks have to figure out how to outfit their labs with a lot of new and fancy and unfamiliar equipment, and they've got to do it fast. Since Celera was sequencing the genome with private money, some critics wondered, why should the government pour so much cash into the exact same research?
In the United States, we invested in the national highway system in the 1950s. We got tremendous return for building roads for free and letting everybody drive up and down them for whatever purpose they wanted. We're building a road up and down the chromosomes for free. People can drive up and down those chromosomes for anything they want to. They can make discoveries, they can learn about medicine, they can learn about history, whatever they want. It is worth the public investment to make those roads available.
But wait a second. What I really want to know is, if you're making a road map of a human being, which human beings are we mapping? I mean, humans come in so many varieties, so whose genes exactly are we looking at?
Yeah, it's mostly a guy from Buffalo and a woman from Buffalo. That's because the laboratory was
An anonymous couple from Buffalo?
No, they're not a couple. They're not a couple.
Oh.
They've never met. The laboratory was a laboratory in Buffalo. And so they put an ad in Buffalo newspapers, and they got random volunteers from Buffalo. They got about 20 of them, and chose at random this sample and that sample and that sample. So nobody knows who they are.
And what about Celera? Whose DNA are they mapping? They also got a bunch of volunteers, around 20, and picked 5 lucky winners.
We tried to have some diversity in terms of, we had an African-American, somebody self-proclaimed Chinese ancestry, 2 Caucasians, and a Hispanic. So some of the volunteers were here on the staff. And
I have to ask, because everybody does, are you one of them?
I am one of the volunteers, yes.
Do you know whether you are one of the winners?
I have a pretty good idea, yes. But I can't disclose that. Because it doesn't matter.
Well, if you're the head of the company and you're watching the decoding of moi, that has a little Miss Piggy quality to it.
Well, any scientist that I know would love to be looking at their own genetic code. I mean, how could you not want to and work in this field?
Every day that passes, more and more pieces of our genome are being turned into private property by way of the U.S. Patent Office.
I said property.
The office is inundated with requests for patents for every imaginable invention, from Star Wars action figures to jet engines. And here, along with all those gizmos, are requests for patents for human genes. Things that exist naturally in every one of us. How is this possible?
We regard genes as a patentable subject matter as we regard almost any chemical. We have issued patents on a number of compounds, a number of compositions that are found in the human body. For example, the gene that encodes for insulin has been patented, and that now is used to make almost all of the insulin that is made. So people's lives are being saved today. Diabetics' lives are better. As a matter of fact, if we ruled out every chemical that's found in the human body,
There'd be an awful lot of inventions that were not able to be protected.
Generally, to patent an invention, you've got to prove that it's new and useful. But a few years ago, critics said that the patent office wasn't being tough enough. So applicants would say, well, here's a brand new sequence of A's, C's, T's, and G's right out of our machines. That's new. Now, useful. What are they going to be used for? Well, they were kind of vague about use, says Eric Lander.
The sort of thing that people used to do then was they would say, it could be used as a probe to detect itself. It's a trivial use. I mean, it's like saying, I could use this new protein as packing peanuts to stuff in a box. I mean, it's true.
Well, wouldn't the patent examiner say, that's not useful?
No. You see, the patent guidelines were very unclear. I don't object to giving somebody that limited time monopoly when they've really invented a cure for a disease, some really important therapy. I do object to giving a monopoly when somebody has simply described a couple hundred letters of a gene, has no idea what use you could have in medicine, because what's going to happen is you've given away that precious monopoly to somebody who's done a little bit of work, and then the people who want to come along and do a lot of work to turn it into a therapy, well, they've got to go pay the person who already owns it. I think it's a bad deal for society.
It takes at least 2 years for the patent office to process a single application. So right now, the patent office says there are about 20,000 genetic patents waiting for approval. All of them are in limbo. This can cause problems for drug companies who are trying to work with genes to cure disease. I'm a company trying to do work on this, and this rung of the ladder. Right. Because I think that I could maybe develop a cure for cancer right here, for the sake of argument. But of course, I have to worry that somebody owns this space.
Well, you have to worry a lot that this region here that you're working on that might cure cancer has already been patented by somebody else, and that patent filing is not public. And so you're living with the shadow that all of your work may go for naught.
Because one day the phone rings and says, sorry, you can't work here, get off my territory.
That's right.
Or, you can work here, but I'm going to charge you $100,000 a week. Or, you can work here and I'll charge you a nickel, but I want 50% of whatever you discover.
And the problem there is it's even worse, because many companies don't start the work whenever there's a cloud over who owns that. If there's uncertainty, companies would rather be working someplace where they don't have uncertainty, and therefore I think work doesn't get done because of the confusion over who owns stuff.
Supporters of patents say they are a crucial incentive for drug companies. Drug research is phenomenally expensive, but if a company can monopolize a big discovery with a patent, it can make hundreds of millions of dollars. Research scientists suddenly find themselves in an unfamiliar world ruled by big money.
Every scientist who does research is now being looked upon as a generator of wealth. Even if that person is not interested in it, if they sequence some DNA, that could be patentable material. So whether the scientist likes it or not, he or she becomes an entrepreneur just by virtue of doing science.
Craig Venter is first a scientist, but he has made the leap from academia into the business world. Well, let me talk about the business of this. Do you consider yourself a businessman?
No, in fact, I still sort of bristle at the term for some reason. But my philosophy is we would not get medical breakthroughs in this country at all if it wasn't done in a business setting. We would not have new therapies if we didn't have a biotech and pharmaceutical industry.
But are they, if you bristle at the word businessman, that might be because in some part of your soul you may think that the business of science and the business of business are fundamentally incompatible for one simple reason. That the business has to sell something and the science has to learn or teach something.
I think I bristle at it because it's used as an attack, used as a criticism. In this case, if the science is not spectacular, if the medicine is not spectacular, there will be no profits.
Venter was given $300 million to set up Celera, and his investors are expecting something in return. But how can they profit from the genome? At the moment, the company is banking on pure computer power. This is Celera's master control. 24 hours a day, technicians monitor all the company's major operations, including the hundreds of sequencers that are constantly decoding our genes. And they oversee Celera's main source of income, a massive website where for a fee you can explore several genomes, including those of fruit flies, mice, and of course, humans. What all this adds up to is something like a big browser, a user-friendly interface between you and your genes.
Our business is to sell products that enable research. That's essentially what we do. So we're used to selling the picks and the shovels to the miners. Tools to interpret the human genome and other related species are merely more products along the same genre. They just happen to be less tangible than a machine.
So Celera's business plan is to gather information from all kinds of creatures, put it together, and sell their findings to drug companies or universities or whomever. But it's the selling part, selling scientific information, that makes some scientists very uncomfortable.
This is a big change in the ethos of the scientific community, which is supposedly it was built upon the idea of communitarian values, of the free and open exchange of information, the fundamental idea that when you learn something, you publish it immediately, you share it with others. Science grows by this communitarian interest of shared knowledge.
I think, why doesn't Pfizer give away their drugs? They could help a lot more people if they didn't charge for them.
At what point is free really free?
I mean, at some price level.
Tony White has absolutely no problem with making money from the human genome.
I hope we have a legal monopoly on the information. I hope our product is so good and so valuable to people that they feel that it's necessary to come through us to get it. Anybody that wants to can build all the tools that we're going to build. Whether or not they will choose to is a different matter.
And which is the better business to be in, do you think? The landlord business or this, you subscribe and I'll give you some information about anything you want business?
They're both lousy businesses. The business to be
Lousy?
They're lousy businesses by comparison with the real business. Make drugs. Actually make molecules that cure people.